to these groups that we have and find ways to reach out to each other, because it's really easy to not feel connected during COVID and then jump onto a campaign and then fight for that campaign and not be able to listen to what the other side is saying.
Okay, I'm optimistic again.
You give us hope.
No, I would throw that back at you. I think that the work that you were doing gave us hope. It was a magical moment. For all of the Zoom calls that we're all participating in these days, it was a magical moment and a very important one. And the reason I wanted to follow up was to find more or less the takeaway, how you felt, how difficult it was to organize. And I guess the next thing is, where do we go from here? When's the next one? Kelly's comment reminded me of Kimberly Crenshaw, who says, if you want to know what's going on in a community, make sure you talk to the vulnerable and the marginalized and start there first and work your way out into the larger community, which is exactly what you've done, which is impressive. So when's the next roundtable?
We were going to have it on the 25th, and then it looks like we have a council reserve because councillors couldn't hold themselves back. And I think we had 10 to 11 motions dropped last night. Yeah, it's difficult because we've been told so many times as councillors to trim down the amount of emotions that we're bringing forward, because it's the same staff doing them. And it's frustrating because people are saying it's the same group in community services working on this. And I think Jean brought 3 more motions.
I just got to jump in.
Did it. Go.
Hey, listen. I can't understand why we think anything is going to get done. Community services, I just found this out, is 3 people.
Yeah, and they got 3 more motions dropped on them last night.
Yes, which is why, and I bring it back to my position on this. The reason why I couldn't, in good faith, support this motion is because of that information right there. Last year, incredible motions were passed, decriminalizing poverty, ending street checks, and Pete's motion, which I can't remember in this moment. That work alone is incredible. And I can't imagine how they are supposed to take on that work, find the funding to do it, collaborate with the right kind of people and community. It just makes it so that staff will only tap the people that they have ready access to for these conversations and for input. And that is really frustrating. And I think there was an article that came out within the last week that mentioned that since this council has started, there's been 200 motions that have passed. And in conversation with a councillor the other day, they were going through all of the motions that have passed, since all of the motions that they had presented that have passed, and no work has actually begun on any of these motions. And these motions are the ones that directly affect the most marginalized people, the most criminalized people in our community. We can't allow that to continue. That is the status quo.
Isn't that the colonial way?
Yes, it is. And I'm not down with it.
That's why moving forward, we were turning around and we're looking at the system and we're going, wait a minute, why is it set up this way? Like a huge part of the conversation at the public safety meeting was we're all in silos. And we see that everywhere. We're not working together. We're not working effectively. And so, where this conversation is leading, having this conversation about community safety, it's like, okay, what do we need? And we're still figuring out what we need. And what we need is staff to operate more effectively, for council to operate more effectively, for the bleeding parts to get dealt with first. We're so entrenched in this system and status quo and how these processes unfold. It's like, oh, this is just the way it's done, and these things take time, and on and on and on. And what we need is leadership on, like, we have to do things differently. We can't continue operating in this system, the system of incremental change. We need transformative change, and we need it now.
And I think community engagement goes a long way to helping that change. And kudos to all of you for the event that you put on, because you got an awful lot of people engaged almost immediately in that discussion. And the next meeting will build on that momentum.
And I think one of the things that's been really powerful about these time to talks and these community dialogues I've had is the ones in person, people were able to connect with each other. And so many people said, guess what? Me and this person connected. I did a tour here. Me and this built this person and this happened. And so to me, that's been the greatest impact from my earlier ones, is that you put people in the room that had conversations that would not normally be able to meet. We also have learned from some of them where speakers took too long and it was difficult. The public art one, Tonye visited that one, right? We had Barry Moa, we had Ian Gillespie. We had people in the room that got challenged by the public, and it was a great conversation at the end. We just didn't give enough space for that component where someone could challenge someone like Gillespie in a room, and Gillespie had the opportunity to voice why they did. I think it was the chandelier was the one that they were challenging. And so for me, having those dialogues, and I'm fortunate to be able to bring those people into the room. I have great connections with people because of the job and privilege I have and honor to be elected as a councillor in the city of Vancouver. And so I'm going to use that as much as I can. And now having Kelly on the team, we're going to try to find a way to have as many as possible, because there's so many great people we can bring in the room to start to move dialogue and to see where this can go. And some of the conversations I've had with Carol Lee from Chinatown said the city doesn't need to do this part of the engagement. We can do that part, right? Like, you don't have to do everything as the city if you know how to work with community. And so once we can learn how to work with community, we don't have to do everything as the city. We can partner better with organizations to do that work. And so the issue is figuring out how that happens.
Well, I think you're on the right track. Encouraging all of us to have more difficult conversations pushes all of these agendas forward. It definitely is going to cause some positive outcomes. So,
yeah, and some discomfort.
Yeah, well, that comes with it. That's how we grow.
Yeah, and one of the best discomforts I've had was been with someone that Reena Sutar, who does the Indigenous director from the Vancouver Park Board, who I think her Instagram title is Unsettle or Unsettle Us. Unsettles me all the time. And we talked about this earlier. One of the biggest ones she challenged me on recently was the Indigenous pavilion in Crab Park, and that it's now being led by white politicians without being founded in the Indigenous people that wanted that movement move forward. And so she said, who wants this facility? And I was like, the community. And she goes, are they signing on to it? Are the Indigenous people leading this work? Can you show me where they are? Can you, right? Like, just because the movements sometimes grow and people take them on, we need to make sure that the people that are foundational to this work are still involved all the way through the process. And I think that was a great learning. And she's taught me so much in some of the work we do on just making sure I do see my lens as I try to put as much of what I'm hoping we can see in this city move forward. And a lot of the stuff in reconciliation is we have a lot of work to do. And that's why I put the movement forward to do a colonial audit, because I'm looking forward to finding ways to decolonize the city. I had a really difficult conversation last week with the police chief, and that was because of this conversation we had and us hosting this dialogue on systemic racism and what that looked like in their department. And he challenged me on the fact that our other departments around the city are less diverse than the police department and what's happening in the fire and others. And so we had this battle, and I think it was a healthy battle, and I think it moved the dialogue forward, but it did also make me think, what are we doing in every department in the city of Vancouver, recognizing our colonial past and some of the dark history we have as a young city?
These are the questions that have to be asked.
Yes.
I mean, I was struck with a number of the comments, and you mentioned one, but the one that got me was, if the land acknowledgement is the least we can do, what's the most you can do? It blew me away. Of course, now I'm thinking of what's the most I can do. So again, kudos to you for putting on this event, because those kinds of moments are precious and they change us. So the more you can do, the better.
So for the city plan, we're sending out a little box you can go pick up your community center right now. It's like a pizza box, and it's got all these fun things in it and how we build the city we want. And one of the things that's in that pizza box talks about the land acknowledgement, why we do it, how you pronounce the names. And 8 months ago, I handed that flyer to the chair of the Persons with Disability Advisory Committee. And he was blown away because he had always wanted to know, but didn't know how to ask the question. He wanted to know why we did it. He wanted to know how to properly pronounce it because he felt uncomfortable every time he had to do it as chair. And just reading that made him feel so comfortable. And he's like, thank you. This helped him take that step. And I think the more we can find ways and ask people what they need to take that first step is critical. And so for me, that's one way to take one step, and we need a lot more ways, but we need to ask people, what do they need to take the next step in reconciliation? What do they need to take the next step in community safety? Because everyone, it will be a bit different, but until we ask those questions and until people feel comfortable giving answers, we're not getting anywhere.
A couple of last questions, because I know you're all busy. Is there a place to go watch the discussion from the 7th? Is it available online?
It is. It's on YouTube, and we can send you a link. It's on the Time to Talk YouTube page.
Okay, and the next meeting may be sometime in the next 30 days?
Yeah, sometime in February we'll find a time, and we'll spread the word. And we really invite the community to reach out and get involved. You know, the way that we set it up, it was a successful evening, and we're also looking for ways to decolonize how we do meetings. So for any suggestions there, any feedback from the community, we urge people to get in touch and just be involved in the conversation, because this is a community conversation that's led by the community. And so it's going to keep growing and evolving from here.
I think you need to keep the facilitator.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the cosign.
I want to be your agent. Because I'm so enamored with the event, I want to just go back to a basic question. What is it that we're not talking about that we should be talking about? Did we miss anything?
I feel like we had not a complete drawing or picture of the conversation. We managed to get a decent spectrum of the voices that need to be at the table. I think that we keep coming back to this idea that this conversation, that all transformative change has to be led from the ground up. So I feel when we do this another time, or as this conversation continues, we should be always endeavoring to ensure that we are putting the voices that typically don't have access to Michael or the mayor, or, can't pick up the phone and call the city with ease, or have relationships with engineering or whatever. Like, those people, as much as their voices need to be heard, I think that this is the time for them to be in the room and listening to the voices of the people that typically don't have that access. So we started that in this first edition of Time to Talk Public Safety, and I hope that we'll continue doing that as we move forward.
Great. Kelly?
Oh, to take a big step back, something that may not come up in the conversation, but I like to bring up whenever we're talking about these societal structure issues, is money in the economy and how criminalizing people has been profited off of. And I think that's just an important frame of reference to hold when we're having these conversations, and just reminding ourselves, is someone profiting off of this? Who is that person? And how can we shift that structure so that our economic system is dependent on the safety and health of people, which is not currently, it doesn't operate that way. So really bigger picture there. I hope that once we get the framework in place and discuss language, then perhaps there'll be further steps where we can start looking at how we can subvert that paradigm.
Thank you. Michael, last words?
No, I just want to thank, obviously, the three of you for allowing me to build on this conversation and continue to find ways that we can navigate, which all elected officials, when, like you said, have reached out and want to be a part, just not sure of how we best do this. And so I think it's okay for us to be a little bit uncomfortable and unsettled. I think it's okay for us to be in rooms that we're unsure of how it's going to turn out. I was super nervous. Tonye was super nervous. I mean, we were nervous about that event, and it's not the easy work that's normally can be done. I think it's when we do the hard work and we create this